Top of the minds here, ladies. My name's Connor Joe, and welcome back to another reading stories video. It's been a long time since I've done one of these, and today we're reading a book from the set of Marvel Superheroes Master Collection. I've had this for freaking 5-6 years. I've read them thousands of times, and I think it's time that I actually do it for someone else, or just for random people, really. So we're starting at the start. We're starting with Spider-Man's origin story. This is rough. This is extremely based on the comics, this set. So on the back here it says, with great power comes great responsibility. So here we go. Marvel Spider-Man, an origin story. Nice little cover photo. These are quick stories as well. So yeah, here we go. Have you ever felt lonely, sad, powerless? Peter Parker felt that way every day. He was a student at Midtown High. Some of the other kids at school didn't understand why Peter enjoyed the things he did. Sometimes when kids don't understand something, they can act cruelly. And it is somewhat a picture book. I'll try my best to show some of the pictures. But anyway. Peter enjoyed all of his classes, but science was his favourite. He was the best student Midtown High had seen in many years, and his teachers were very proud of him. The only thing Peter loved more than science was his family. He lived with his Aunt May and Uncle Ben in Queens, New York. When Peter felt sad at school, he remembered he'd be home soon, and he started to smile again. Even though some of the kids at school didn't like him, Peter never stopped trying to be friendly. He had heard about the great demonstration at the science hall. He asked the other kids if they wanted to join him. The other students just laughed at Peter. One of them, a bully named Flash Thompson, even pushed him to the ground. Peter's backstory is so sad as well. He loses his parents when he's young, and then, yeah. By the time Peter arrived at the science hall, he'd forgotten all about his classmates' cruel actions. All he could think about was the experiment. He couldn't wait to see how the scientist would control a radioactive wave. The rays were ready. Peter eagerly looked on, but so did something else. The demonstration was about to begin. So this, is somewhat what happens with his origin story. But here we go. Peter was awed by the experiment. He was thrilled to be there, in the company of such brilliant scientists. He wanted to be just like them, smart, talented, amazing. Everyone was so fascinated that no one noticed something unplanned occurred. A spider descended between the rays just as they were activated. As you can see, I know it probably doesn't come up super clear. As the radioactive spider fell, dying, it bit the nearest living thing, which happened to be Peter Parker. So this is where he gets his powers. As soon as he was bitten, Peter felt weak and tired. The room began to spin. The scientists noticed Peter looked ill, and they offered help. But Peter just wanted to get out of the dark laboratory and into the fresh air. Peter felt a sudden, particular tingling in his head. It was an itching, urging, nudging feeling. The only thing he understood about it was that he was meant to react, to do something. Oh, his spider sense was tingling. So he did. And now he's Spider-Man. He can stick to the walls. Peter was sure he was dreaming. He couldn't really be climbing up a wall. Nobody can do that. When he reached the roof, he grabbed onto a chimney and crushed it. He didn't have that kind of strength. Peter felt the tingling feeling again. This time it gave him the urge to spring So he jumped from one tall roof to another. And then when he wanted to go back down to the street, the same strange feeling told him the easiest way to get there was climb down the clothesline. Parkour. Peter stared at himself in amazement. How could this be happening? Then Peter realised he had started feeling different right after he'd been bitten by the spider in the lab. Somehow the experiment must have affected the dying creature, and when it bit Peter, it transferred its powers to him. As he wandered home, amazed, half-dazed, a sign outside an old wrestling theatre caught his eye. It could be a perfect way to test out all of his newfound abilities. I feel like I gotta show the pictures because it's like part of the story. Peter rushed home. Then he rushed right back again. Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a Spider-Man does. Peter was ready to test his new powers on the brutish wrestler called Crusher Hogan. Peter wore a disguise so that no one would make fun of him if his plan didn't work. He'd been teased and taunted enough. When Peter challenged Crusher Hogan laughed. The Crusher soon found out he was very wrong to do so. It's not exactly how the movie plays out, but it's close. Peter was paid well for the victory. A man in the crowd even asked him if he wanted to be on TV. Things seemed finally going right for Peter. Plus, Peter had his Aunt May and Uncle Ben at home. They were still doing everything they could to make him happy. His uncle had even set up for a special microscope Peter had wanted. With his new microscope, Peter's experiments would be better than ever. Uncle Ben reminded him that knowledge and science were power. And Uncle Ben told Peter, with great power comes great responsibility. Peter was too excited to settle down. He used his new microscope, his chemistry set, and his knowledge of science to create a very special fluid. It had the strength and stickiness of a side of silk. Then when he created a device that could spin fluid into a web, the way a spider could, he called them web shooters. Now, I know in the original movie and in the comics, the webs actually came out of him in the original Tobey Maguire movie. But that's not what happens in this book, apparently. Finally, he designed a sleek new costume. All he needed was the stage name. He arrived at one that was good as any. Oh, wait. The pictures. Spider-Man. Peter's TV appearances was a huge hit. After all, who wouldn't want to be amazed by the Spider-Man climbing up walls and swinging from his own webs? Soon, everyone wanted to piece of Spider-Man. Peter was starting to feel important, wanted, and powerful. No one would ever be able to push him around again. Not when he had powers like these. Peter got lost, thinking about how wonderful his new life would be. He daydreamed about fame and celebrity. And when a security guard called for help in the studio hall, Peter ignored him. Now this is... Pay attention to that guy right there. Remember that face. The crook that the guard was chasing raced into the elevator. The doors closed and the thief escaped. Peter didn't care. He had great power, and from now on, he only needed to look out for one person. Himself. It didn't take long for Peter to forget about the guard and the escaped criminal. In fact, by the time he got home, they were the furthest thing from his mind. He was just happy to be at home with people who loved him. And in his spare time, when he wasn't studying or at home with his family, Peter went out as the famous, spectacular Spider-Man. But one night, on his way home from the TV performance, Peter arrived to find something worrisome. Peter knew something was terribly wrong, and he was right. His Uncle Ben had been killed by a criminal. The police officers told Peter not to worry. They had the crook cornered at the old waterfront warehouse. Peter ran upstairs, put on his costume, and swooped over the city to revenge his uncle. Peter was quicker and more furious than ever before. At last, Peter arrived at the warehouse. He landed on the far wall. The thief was stunned. And then, Spider-Man sprang into action. Don't know how well you can see it, but that guy there, just have a look at his face the next time you see it. The man reached out his gun, but Peter was so fast. Before the man could shoot, Spider-Man sent out a web, snatching the gun away. Famous move he does, grabs the gun and punches him in the face with it. The crook hat fell off from his head, and Peter finally got a good look at him. Peter felt a heavy weight in his chest. It couldn't be, but it was. The man who killed his uncle was the same man he allowed to escape in the elevator at the studio. If only Peter had stopped him then. If only he hadn't not acted so selfish. See? It's the same guy from the theatre. I did say that too. Stunned, Peter tied up the criminal in webbing and dangled him from a street lamp for the police to find. The most Peter could do now was prevent him from hurting anyone else. Through the haze of his grief, Peter realised something. He had not chosen these abilities, but was obligated to use them for good. It was not about the money, or the fame, or any of the other rewards his powers could give him. He'd finally realised what he meant when Uncle Ben told him was true. With great power comes great responsibility. Pictures. And that's the rule Peter Parker lived by from that day forward. And that is Spider-Man's origin story. 1 to 10, I rate it probably about a 5, because like I've read them all before, and like they just do get repetitive. You do start to just memorize it. I haven't read them for like 3 years, but yeah. So that's that one done. The next one I'm not going to read in this video. I'll probably do it tomorrow. But the next one we're going to be reading is the wonderful Iron Man origin story. And it says, heroes aren't born, they are built on the back. But that's really all I got time for in this video. If I see you again today, you'll be very lucky, but you never know. But until next time, pound it and noggin. See ya!